Welcome. Is everyone awake? I think so. It's like 9:30. Come on. All right. So the presentation today, how to combat electro-pollution with ancestral practices. And that's my name. So I saw this map. That's just a map looking at how many antennas, how many Wi-Fi hotspots there are worldwide. It's on I think the site is wiggle.com, and all credit goes to Magda Havas, who presented it here a few years back and who presented similar maps. I decided I should do the same maps, but looking at the introduction of new technologies, because now we're just around the corner of rolling out what's called 5G, the fifth generation of wireless signals. But back in 1996, what was around was more 2G, and I remember my dad had this car with the antenna on top and the cell phone that was literally, you had a kind of wired cell phone in the car that was just a massive beast. So that's 1996, and you had 17,000 antennas in the US. And you see the red dots, you don't, because basically we didn't have a lot of electro-pollution. You'll see the next slide though. This is 3G, 2006, yes. Almost 200,000 antennas in the US, and you see that the electro-pollution levels are starting to rise in Europe, and not a lot happening in South Africa and other countries. 2006, it was still very early for them, but that's the third generation of signals. And 10 years later, just a few years back, that's 4G. 2016, yeah, the world is on fire a little bit, so that's unfortunately 210,000 antennas in the US, but there's also saturation because now the levels are getting higher and higher as user demand augments. 2006, almost no one had a smartphone. The iPhone came in 2007, I think. So at this point, people started using a lot of data. So this is the result of user demand. And the truth is, we don't know what's going to happen with 5G because, well, it's just being rolled out. About 30 US cities as the time we're recording this. The projection by the industry, the worst projection I could find, worst case scenario, so to speak, by 2025, we're going to have 13 million plus antennas in the US alone. So there's a jump from 4G to 5G that's going to be simply tremendous in how saturated the environment is. And then I learned about this a few days back, and I thought, well, I'm Montreal, like we're so behind on 5G, everything is merry. Well, I saw news on TVA Nouvelle, where I used to work, in fact, as a copywriter a few years back. And it said, well, we're going to need 50 times more cell towers in Montreal compared to before. So 1,200 antennas that are 4G right now, and we're going to go up to 60,000 for 5G within a few years' time. And these antennas, the difference with 5G is the proximity of antennas, right? You had 4G towers, you see them on a hill, you see them on a building. They're not so close to people, except if you happen to be the unfortunate person living right next to the antenna, but it's just a few people. Most people are not exposed right next to the source, and the closer you are to a source, the more radiation you're getting. So the problem with 5G is they might be hard to spot, but they're basically installed everywhere. So that's one, just on any utility pole. It could be a traffic light sign, for example. This one right on top of a lamppost, and this one on top of just standard electricity lines. So it means that the proximity will be much more likely that you're going to live near one of these. Not here at Shelburne Farms, of course, but especially in highly dense populated areas like I live in with my wife and kid in Montreal, unfortunately. So it's going to be multiple antennas at every block. And then in residential areas, we're talking about 3 to 12, every 3 to 12 homes, there's a new antenna. Why is that? Well, it's because we want more speed. Again, user demand, we want HD videos and whatnot. And the fact that the technology requires such high power, but is a technology that is used at a short distance, makes it so that we need to install more antennas. And it is a technology that's also very directional. So instead of having a 4G antenna that was kind of sending the signal out there 270 degrees, kind of, oh, okay, catch it. Well, now it's going to be a beam directed towards your phone. The problem is this beam can also go towards a pedestrian that's crossing you. So there's always a question of secondhand EMFing instead of secondhand smoking that just is a new issue. As a new dad, I was very concerned when I read about all these things and 5G, and then I came across this news, and that's in French. I'll translate for you. It talks about the milk bottle holder for your smartphone has been invented, and that's from lefigaro.fr in France. And someone was very rational to comment. She said, Nick, they are making smart diapers too that can be connected via Bluetooth. What could go wrong? And I'm like, oh, this is a good comment, so I'll screenshot this. So what's happening is we live in an age where everything I talked about, this electro-pollution, the meme right now that's perpetuated by lawmakers, the industry, most people in the mainstream medical science say, well, it's doing nothing to the human body, so we're perfectly safe. So if it's doing nothing, well, let's just invent more smart technology. So for example, it's a very good idea to kind of be blasting your kid while feeding him. And then I saw this news last year, and I told myself, well, if there's nothing happening with this technology, let's just make sure that we launch 12, well, SpaceX wants to launch about 20,000 satellite constellations around the planet because we're going to give free internet to every citizen on the planet for free, which is good in a sense. If you think about it, with education, access to knowledge, this is tremendous. However, if we happen to know that there are consequences to this electro-pollution, that might be a mistake. So, but the thing for me, in the midst of scientific uncertainty, you know, some people would say there's no effect, there is effect, it is super dangerous, it is not, was that I talked to Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. And for those of you who don't know who Dr. Klinghardt is, he's recognized as a medical pioneer, especially in the treatment of chronic disease. And he practices in the US at the Sophia Health Institute in Washington State, also in Germany and also in Switzerland, maybe other places. He's always on the go. And he has about 60 years of medical practice. So what he told me a few years back really changed my career, because he told me, Nick, I can pretty much divide my patient population in the middle. There's a group that gets better and that heals, and the group that won't budge or is getting worse. And the group that's getting better are the ones who follow my recommendations to reduce EMF exposure. It is this black and white. So when I heard that, I told myself, I'm a journalist, you know, so I don't take it at face value, but he wasn't the only one saying that. So the doctors were saying that EMF pollution matters a lot, and that it seems that people who live either in a vicinity of these towers or exposed to certain devices cannot heal properly, because we're creating something that goes away from ancestral levels of EMFs. And I'll show you what these are just for fun. But let me talk a little bit about myself. We'll go quickly because I already introduced. I'm an investigative health journalist from Montreal, Canada. I wrote the non-tinfoil guide to EMFs and the electrosmog EMF course also. That's kind of the professional level version of my work. And my work on EMFs has been endorsed by top health authorities, all of which are saying that EMFs is a huge issue. And these people are really talking about it, and I appreciate so much Dr. Mercola, and you probably heard him or either on his website or the interviews he's doing. He's really fighting to get this message out there. Dr. Ben Lynch, Dr. Tom O'Brien, and some of them, like Dr. Ben Lynch or Tom O'Brien, are also medical doctors who are seeing patients. Even Dr. Zach Bush, who's here at the event, has seen these cases where people are clearly affected by EMF. So instead of, in my work, I like, to look at the science, to try to understand the science, to say we need more science. But in the meantime, the clinicians also see things and realize things that I think are as close to the truth as you can get, because it's happening to real people and they're getting better when you remove the offending source. And today I'm going to tell you, this is all a little bit doom and gloom, and I know the atmosphere is kind of heavy. Just after everyone was healed, I'm kind of crushing them. But it's sort of like, Nick, it's only 9:30. Like, give me a few cups of coffee to be able to digest this information. But I'm going to tell you how we can use the good old ancestral practices that everyone here is trying to do their best to follow, but how it can help you combat electropollution. So how it can make your body more resilient. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to remove the sources and whatnot, but mainly I want to tell you that yes, there's hope, because science is also showing that some of these ancestral practices are helping us cope with it. Doesn't mean I want it to still roll out and things like that. And that's not the goal of this presentation. I do advocacy to change technology, to spark innovation towards safer technologies, to not launch satellites in space, because to me it just doesn't make sense. But in the meantime, we will get exposed a little bit more. Even if you live in nature like this, you will get exposed a little bit more. The good news is that these ancestral practices actually help us cope with it. I'll tell you very briefly what EMFs are. I know some people here might be a little bit lost about this whole intro. How EMFs impact your health, a little bit about the mechanisms, and then I'll get into the 4 ancestral practices. And we'll have time for a Q&A, so as long as we can afford to. What EMFs are? Well, let's talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, because EMFs is really a bit of a misnomer. Electromagnetic frequencies or electromagnetic fields, but there's a whole spectrum of things that could be called an EMF. Anything from electricity in your household wiring, which would be around 50 to 60 hertz, to nuclear radiation. So of course, there are certain of these types that are natural EMFs, certain of these types that are unnatural EMFs. Certain we know they're dangerous, certain we know they're beneficial. So there is such thing as the natural EMFs. For example, we see with our eyes, and this is actually a type of EMF, which is visible light. There's also part of the light spectrum that we don't see. Infrared, certain frequencies in infrared range, and certain UVs we don't see, but you can sure feel it if you get sunburn or even just get tanned. So we know that there's also such thing as a good dose of natural EMFs and as an abusive dose for the body of natural EMFs, and the sun is a perfect example. The man-made EMFs, that's really what my work is all about, is, okay, well, in the last 30 years, and well, the last 100 years we had electricity introduced, and this is a change in the EMF environment, just being in a room where I am exposed to these EMFs a little bit. But then in the last 30 years, as you saw in the pictures, even the last 10 years, everything changed, and that's mainly the microwave and radio frequency range. So I'm talking about the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell towers, and what we're having inside the home, inside the buildings, the Wi-Fi routers and whatnot, and also what we're putting outside, and that we're kind of covering up the environment with new EMFs that our biology is not grown with. And how does it affect your cell? Well, the main mechanism, and this is not a science-heavy presentation, but still I think it's important to discuss about it, because a lot of people, regulators, medical doctors, people from the industry say, well, this is low-level radiation, right? Because the power levels are not such that it's going to directly break your DNA. And this type of EMF, let's say Wi-Fi, is non-ionizing. So it means, well, it cannot directly harm your DNA. And that was the previous understanding, even though there's studies from the 70s showing the opposite, but it's still the understanding that this is non-ionizing radiation, so there's nothing that could happen. The problem is, again, that you just don't know what you don't know. So eventually, 2013, Dr. Martin Pall from the Washington State University found this. And this is a little bit complicated, but that's a cell. And he found, through gathering a lot of studies around the effects of EMFs on rats, that when an EMF hits the cell, you have something called the calcium channels. And this is just one of the multiple channels that will shuttle certain ions, certain minerals inside the cell and outside the cell. And in this case, it is a type of calcium channel called the voltage-gated calcium channel, the L type in particular. But long story short, when the EMFs hit the cell doesn't recognize what the heck is happening, because this is an outside signal. On this calcium channel, you have sensors, very, very sensitive voltage-gated sensors. And what happens when Wi-Fi hits the cell is that the door stays open and the calcium flows into the cell. And calcium isn't an unhealthy mineral to have. However, there's a fine balance inside the cell compared to outside the cell. Normally, you have what's called a gradient. You have a difference between the calcium around the cell and the exterior of the cell, in between the cells, and in the interior. You barely have any calcium inside compared to outside. And this is just how things are, how your body stays in homeostasis. And the consequences of having too much calcium, then you get the effects of these EMFs. So this is not the direct effect, this is an indirect effect. And some things that happen is the rise in nitric oxide. Again, great benefits for health, but when you have abusive levels of nitric oxide that mixes with something else called superoxide, you get peroxynitrite. And peroxynitrite is oxidative stress. And this is where the problems start to happen. So in very simple words, what it does on a cellular level at a very, and this is something that happens over now a lifetime of exposure, of course. For some people, they get affected quickly, but most people cannot feel it. Even though this is happening in the background, because it's causing things just on a cellular level. For example, oxidative stress. Well, I don't feel myself being oxidized by this Wi-Fi thing I have on my belt, but it is doing something. So the cells are getting fatigued and getting accumulating this stress, and which they have to cope with. DNA damage is a long-term consequence to this oxidative stress, and it can be repaired, but each time you repair your DNA, you're using cellular energy. So this is Dr. Ted. A lot of people here talked about mitochondrial energy. Well, repairing DNA damage over and over and over, because you're getting exposed 24/7, it leads to a loss of cellular mitochondrial energy. So the long-term effects is, right? All the cells start slowing down. It becomes more difficult to stay healthy, and this is what Dr. Klinghardt realized. Inflammation is also part of the cycle. So an inflammation that just keeps coming back, and this is a huge issue for so many people with so many diseases these days. Hormonal disruption is also something that is seen. So everything is intertwined. So what happens is, if on a cellular level you harm the cell this way, you can see the effects literally on any body part. The concentration of these calcium channels, it's important that to know that it's more concentrated in the brain, in the heart, and then the nervous system. And this is most of the effects that we're seeing in the little medical literature that we have around, let's say, electrosensitivity, although I don't like the term, but we're seeing the symptoms happen in the brain and the nervous system. Fatigue, weakness, sleep disturbance, insomnia, and then it becomes really on in the head area. Headaches or migraines, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, depression, anxiety, and this is very common. The problem with these first five, that could be coming from anything. I mean, it could be just a stressful job. It could be dehydration, too much sugar. So it is very vague, and it is difficult to pinpoint on EMF exposure. It is almost easier if you're more sensitive in some sense, because you might stand right next to a computer that's connected via Wi-Fi and start getting brain fog, and then you remove yourself and you feel fine. So you're like, oh, okay, well, this is giving me this. For a lot of people, it's just a reduction in their overall health when they are in this high EMF environment, whether it's their own home, the office, or just living in a city, for example, because in a city, the background levels, just like the air quality goes down when you go in cities where there's smog, the same thing can be said for the EMF environment that goes up. Other things that are related to EMF exposure: memory loss, visual disruptions or light sensitivity, skin problems, and heart palpitations and dizziness. These two, for people who are, let's say, hypersensitive, very common. especially heart palpitations that simply cannot be explained because when they test the heart, it's perfectly healthy. However, this arrhythmia or bradycardia, tachycardia, different symptoms that you can have, the heart just responds in a very weird manner to being very close to a source. Usually it's an acute exposure that is leading to that. But the problem with these, again, is that if medical doctors are not recognizing that it's a problem, and this is just non-ionizing radiation and it can do nothing, they're not looking for these symptoms. They're not asking the simple questions, well, your heart arrhythmia, have you realized that it's in a certain time of the day, or maybe at your office you're standing right next to a source and then you get them, but not on this other chair. So sometimes it is something that's created by the environment. Medical doctors don't ask these questions, so the medical science doesn't advance a lot in a climate where the levels are going up and the understanding is barely increasing at the same time. But the good news, because there is such thing as good news today, 4 ancestral practices to combat electro-pollution. And the first one, I just want to show you this graphic. You don't have to analyze it. It would take like 30 minutes, honestly. I don't even know what's on there. But it just talks about the natural background. This is a natural background about in 1920s of frequency at 1 gigahertz. So that's about a frequency that could be used by your cell phone or, let's say, smart meters, and the increase over 100 years. And what this says, basically, and this is from Alasdair Phillips from PowerWatch UK and Graham Lamburn, it says that there's an increase of a quintillion times more exposure in the last 100 years in this frequency. So people who are a bit skeptical and tell me, Nick, well, my banana emits radiation, or we've always been exposed to microwave radiation from space, because there are such things as background levels. So in space you have all sorts of frequencies, and this is one of the ways we're able to identify certain characteristics of planet, is even what is being emitted towards us from this planet. And I'm not good in astrophysics, don't ask me for more details. But in other words, there is such thing as radiation in space. I'm not arguing over that, but we have increased this radiation in this range that in nature has never been seen before, and with signals that are more and more complicated. So it just shows you that we're very far, even here in this room, from ancestral levels. So strategy number one would be, well, let's try to get as close as possible to getting an ancestral dose of EMFs, because that's something our ancestors did by default. They just, didn't have to do anything because the technology wasn't invented yet. But this is, what you're seeing on the right is airplane mode, this button in orange. This is something you want to hit as often as you can. And this is the iPhone interface, but it is also true with other devices, Android and such. And something we've developed, because it is hard to start reducing your exposure and just seeing the maps and talking about 5G. You even wonder at times, is it even worth it to do anything about it? Because we're getting exposed 24/7, and the answer is still yes. And the message is one of empowerment that I want to leave you with, because to get closer to your ancestral dose of EMFs, sure, you can worry a little bit about exposures that come from a cell phone tower, but there's little you can do about it. You can help fight for better regulations and safer technologies, but that's a long-term strategy. But it still matters what you're exposing yourself to on your body, and that's your cell phone. So this is why we've launched that online, the 5-Day EMF Cell Phone Challenge, and it's very simple. You hit airplane mode at night. I saw statistics 2 weeks ago, 1/3 of all teens in America sleep with their cell phone. So, and I would argue almost none of them know about this, because you gotta click it. So why would you, if you're not aware of this radiation? And one of the top symptoms is sleep disturbance. We also know that teens have problems sleeping at night, depression, and we saw also the presentation from Beth Lambert about the health of our youth right now. It's not going well. So it's one of the factors that's preventing them from just having great health. So airplane mode at night, and you don't want to be charging your phone either if it's very close to your head. Make sure to have a few feet distance, and preferably you can also completely turn off your cell phone at night, even better. Airplane mode when you carry it. Because some people would say, Nick, I never use my cell phone, but then I see them and it's in their pocket. Well, it is also emitting 24/7 if you didn't hit airplane mode. It is trying to connect to the tower. So there is radiation emitted by your phone just 24/7. If it's on airplane mode, it is way safer. Almost perfectly safe. So when you carry it, whether if it's anywhere touching your body, I see women running sports bra, the cell phone is there. There are case reports of women developing very malignant breast tumors right underneath where they carried their phone for several hours per day. Still early, the research, I'm not arguing over that, but it's very concerning. Anywhere that your phone is touching your body is probably not a good idea. And this is one of your large sources of individual exposure that at least you have control over. So that's important. And the third thing is when you talk on the phone, you want to create a 1 foot distance from your head or from your body overall, because if you keep it near any organ, you are selecting this organ to be more exposed to others, and that's probably not something you want to do, whether it's your fertility, whether it's your breast health, or it's something else. And it's if in your back pocket, we can talk about prostate, ovaries, even colon, and we know that these cancers are also increasing, so don't take any chance and create this distance from your head. If I was talking on the phone, I would hold it in my hand. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, just put it in front of me on the surface and just have, for example, one of the safest earbuds you could use is called an air tube headset. And it is sold by different companies. One of them is Defender Shield, and there are also other types of headset, and it uses a hollow tube to transmit sound instead of a wire. So it is even safer when you use it because you don't have the radiation go up the wire. And that's a bit of a technicality, but I think it's important to mention. And a couple of things to look for. If you're even just getting started, don't even bother doing anything else for now. Just for 5 nights, eventually you're gonna, remove different sources, start getting into the habit. Just like eating healthier food, you don't start and go kind of cold turkey. Some people can, and that's okay, but for me, it was really gradual. I remember going to the health food store in Sherbrooke, where I used to live, and just stocking up on a few things. I'm like, oh, organic nuts. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna eat. Like I was really baby stepping the process, and it's really something that helped me get healthier and start changing my habits. So the same thing for EMFs. Look for better sleep, better mood, more energy. If you do that and you realize I sleep better, well, now you found your truth. You found the fact that, okay, well, I don't know if Nick is full of it, but it looks like I'm sleeping better, so why not? It's a button, right? Same thing with people in your household who are extremely skeptical. I understand that someone wrote a review on Amazon.com for my book, and they said, Nick, this book will both ruin and save your life. And the review talked about, well, I did the mistake of reading this book, starting to implement things at home, and it was the husband, in fact, who read the book. Sometimes it's the opposite. And then my wife started freaking out. Like, what are you doing? You're turning off the Wi-Fi. You're doing this, doing this. So get your spouse on board, the entire household if you have teenagers also, but have them do the challenge. Like, okay, please just do that for me. And if they realize they sleep better, then they have to respect it a little bit more, because how else is this affecting me, right? And then you can go a little bit deeper. I mean, of course, it's only the start, because there are sources that are similar to cell phones. If we talk about having a laptop, if I put it on my lap, there are antennas right there near the end of the keyboard that are equivalent to a cell phone. It's not better to expose yourself to a laptop or to a tablet or even to a Bluetooth device that's touching your body. So Bluetooth is just another type of technology that emits the same or very similar EMFs as your cell phone and Wi-Fi. So this is why it's a very poor replacement. You're replacing one source with another. It's pretty much like trying to cut your white sugar intake, but having organic white sugar instead. You know, so is it better? Yes, but you're not cutting out sugar really. So you're just replacing one thing with another. As long as it's touching your body, you are exposing yourself to a bigger dose. And then the Wi-Fi router. This is probably one of the trickiest source that we have at home, because you introduce this radiation to your home to have coverage. This is essentially what Wi-Fi is doing. When you're happy to have speedy Wi-Fi, it means that in the room where you're standing, you're happy to have increased EMF pollution. So it's kind of a conundrum. Well, okay, how do I do it? Well, you can eliminate it. And most people won't like this advice. Like, they hate it. On some podcasts, I don't even talk about it because I know the audience won't be receptive. So I just tell them, well, turn it off when not in use or at night. Use a Christmas light timer and plug it in, and it turns off at 11 p.m., turns back on at 7 a.m., so you have 8 hours of relief. That's good. However, for me and for people, Dr. Klinghardt, for example, other doctors that see people who are sensitive, they don't think it's sufficient. They say, well, you know what? There's enough cell towers and things in the exterior. Don't bring this into your home. So instead, have just the standard router, and there is such thing called a wire that still works. You can plug in your computer, and it works. It goes on the internet. You never drop off signal, but you do have to either have the wire run somewhere, like we have in an apartment, and Jen, my wife in the back, is coping with me because we're just doing the works this summer to have the wires go in everywhere. But right now, my son Elliot, who is a little bit over 1, wants to eat the wires and slam the wires and see what will happen if he pulls on the wire and the computer is right on the verge of being destroyed, and he's super happy about it. Well, that's part of our learning process. So it is more complicated to go wire, don't get me wrong, but if you have a home and your computer mainly stays in the office, there's really no need to be on Wi-Fi. So investing a little bit of money, an electrician can have these Ethernet cables go all over the place until it reaches your computer, and you will reduce your exposure tremendously, especially if, like me, you're spending a lot of time in front of the computer. So that's something to keep in mind to reduce your exposure long term. And the cumulative exposure is really what matters here. So it's very, very important to take care of that. And can someone from the organization just tell me at what time I started, because I'm a little bit, I just want to pace myself? No? There's no one. I'm left alone. Well, we'll go. That's all right. Oh, I see. That's all right. I have actually the number of time I've been talking. Perfect. I'm pretty good on time. Sources similar to Wi-Fi router. So if you take care of this hot potato of a EMF source that's a Wi-Fi router, you also want to take care of other sources that are easy to forget. One of them is cordless phones. You know, phones that have this base station where you charge them, especially the new phones in the last 10 years, are super powerful, because you could literally be down the street and walk 100 feet, sometimes 300 feet from your home, and you still get the signal. Why is that? It's because the base station is a miniature cell tower, right? This is essentially what you're bringing in your home. So if you keep it in your home, it is increasing. It is having one Wi-Fi router there, another, and you just multiply the sources. So having a corded landline, I know that unfortunately even in some states and cities it's not even an option anymore, but while it is, you can still opt to have a corded landline. And the cordless phones are just very harsh, and a lot of people have them in their bedroom on top of that. So yeah, you put your phone on airplane mode, but you have something worse next to it. So you try to remove as many of these devices as possible. The digital personal assistant, a lot of people are having those. So Google Home, Alexa, and they just look like little tubes, and you can talk to them, and they can listen to your private information and send it to the NSA. And oh, that's being recorded. Cut this part. And then And then you have the baby monitors, and this is something that I've used a little bit in certain occasions, but you don't want to put the baby monitor right next to the baby in the crib. That's even something that's not recommended just for choking hazard, so don't do that. We see that, I think we still see that in movies, and I'm like, oh, that's not right. No, you put it as far as possible in the room, as long as you can hear. If possible, there are a few wired options, and unfortunately, there are not a lot of alternatives to baby monitors, but they can be extremely powerful, just like a Wi-Fi router, believe it or not. So it's just another source that you want to minimize as much as you can manage to. Advanced EMF reduction step, that's a picture I took last year. I had my Cornet, we don't see anything about the levels. Basically, they were like, my Cornet is a very amateur level EMF meter, but it was just in the green zone and I didn't hear anything. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is a place to be. I know that the energy will be good and that like it is very clean environment. Even if here we have Wi-Fi, we have cell phones, well, just in the exterior, it's a very pristine environment compared to where I live. And so, but I mean, you can opt to live in Shelburne. That's probably a good step for your health, to be quite honest. But sometimes you cannot. So if you live in a city, the outside sources of EMFs, including the 5G towers, there are ways, advanced ways that you can block these signals to some extent. Sometimes the cost associated and the time and associated with it can be tremendous, but it can be done. And my advice after years studying this is that you should not take any chances and you should hire a professional before installing any type of EMF blocking products, including there is a blocking paint that you could apply to the walls, there are shielding curtains, there are bed canopies, a kind of Faraday cage that you could put over your bed. And for people who are extremely sensitive, these steps sometimes are not even optional. Dr. Klinghardt has a lot of people sleep under bed canopies because they suffer from chronic Lyme or Parkinson's or different diseases that they have already seen 30, 50 practitioners before, and they cannot figure out why they're not healing. Well, their environment just isn't supportive, so then you have to do more. But these things, I see a lot of people asking me personal questions. Nick, I have this cell tower, I'm trying to put aluminum paper over the wall, and believe it or not, it works. It can actually block some of the radiation. However, if you don't have the instruments to test before and after your shielding job, you don't know if you're really bringing benefits and if you're spending your time in the right way. So I'm going to recommend 3 types of EMF mitigation professionals in the US that you could hire, and also these professionals can be found also in other countries. There are building biologists, and these slides, I'll try to have them under the replay on YouTube to make sure you can have these links. There are also the geovital consultants, and there are now a new certification coming up, or a new team, Shielded Healing. So Brian Hoyer in the back, and they are in the corner right there, Shielded Healing, where they have now Brian is training his team, and they are roaming throughout the U.S., and you can contact them to see if they're going to be in your city. Hopefully, Brian is going to come to my house in Montreal, and I'm going to be able to film this. But each of these EMF mitigation specialists can help you, whether it's by an initial consult on the phone or Skype, and then coming to your home. I think it's very, very important, because especially when we talk about outside sources or sources from the neighbors, if you live in an apartment building, the individual protection steps I talked about are still valid, but to some extent, if your neighbor decides that he wants stronger Wi-Fi, then we don't have laws, and we don't know really how to deal with these situations right now where, hey, you're kind of secondhand EMFing me. Well, it's not, you cannot say that to your neighbor. Your neighbor will kind of think yeah, he will probably call the police. But yeah, you cannot say that in the moment, but you could do something about it with these advanced solutions. And it's important to note that also a lot of people are simply worried, and worry is really a pollution of the body, also a fear over, if you see a 5G tower and you're like, oh, I think I'm exposed. Am I exposed? Oh, I'm exposed. I don't know if my symptoms, eventually it can become a mind game. You can become so fearful that it makes you sick. too. So if you don't know if this tower is exposing you, if this power line is too close to your child's bedroom, the only way to know is really to have high-level professional grade instrumentation and the knowledge that comes with it. So this is really why you need to go see Brian and book a consult for your home, or any type of professional, or at least think about it and start saving money. I think it's money extremely well invested, especially if you live in a big city, and especially if you're worried about it and you're kind of you're seeing a cell tower or something and just worrying over it. So it's really clearing things out. It's going to really help you. I want to talk about 3 other ancestral strategies. I was in, where was it? Prague, and 4 Celsius, basically. And I was barefoot for 10 minutes, couldn't feel my feet, but I felt great, believe it or not. I think it's a cold thermogenesis also, right? So I wanted to get my grounding on that morning, and it's very important that you do it in nature as much as possible. I was in a city, not ideal, but in a natural setting. Go swim in the lake, walk in the grass here, especially because it's a low EMF environment. It's a very natural setting. Swim in the ocean. The grounding or earthing, just having a connection with the earth, it's actually not just a hippie-looking practice. Now science in the last 20 years, the Earthing Institute, and led by James Oshman and Dr. Gaëtan Chevalier, who's a fellow French-Canadian now working in California, they have really elucidated what are the mechanisms that prove that there are extremely beneficial things that happen to your body when you're just barefoot on the earth, because the earth as grounding literally is your body finding what's ground, what's the normal electricity, and kind of retuning these sensors inside your body. We are bioelectrical beings, and now science is confirming that. So a few things that are seen in science right now is that grounding is a strong antioxidant. So EMFs, oxidative stress, grounding, antioxidant. It helps you mount a defense. Regulates your blood pressure. A lot of people have blood circulation issues around EMFs for a lot of reasons, but this regulates your blood pressure, and it's really helps with blood viscosity. People who have thick blood really helps, and these results can be seen in like 20 minutes. So it's also, you don't have to do it all day necessarily to get the benefit, but generally the more the better. Dramatically reduces EMF-related symptoms in sensitive people. So people who get a lot of these symptoms, they've been exposed or they spend time in a city, or even you just landed from a flight where you're exposed to gamma rays, you're exposed to now Wi-Fi, unfortunately, in a metal box. So the flights are very harsh on biology. If you land and you ground yourself, you'll see jet lag go down tremendously, and that's one of the reasons. It also calms down the nervous system. So I could have gone on the technical details of it, but there's a lot of things that EMF causes that are nullified or greatly reduced by earthing yourself, especially in nature, because it has so many other benefits for the body. But then the problem is it safe to ground inside the home? And this is a very controversial topic, even in our small EMF space. And some grounding researchers, Gaëtan Chevalier, and a lot of people see, yes, I would use, for example, a grounding mat that you're seeing. So you would have a type of mat that has silver thread or a conductive surface, and this would be rerouted to the third outlet, the third prong of an outlet, right? So you ground yourself via the electrical grid. And they say, well, we're doing that in studies, we're still seeing benefits. However, it's very unclear what it's doing in certain situations. Dr. Klinghardt says, I do recommend grounding with a grounding mat, but make sure to turn off the circuit breakers at first. Why is that? Well, it's because if you have live electricity in your walls, this is a type of EMFs. And if you're plugging your mat in there, chances are that you can maybe have some benefits, but maybe have some detriments at the same time. And right now it's not clear. So I don't have a good answer for it, but if you use a grounding rod, so you run this wire from your mat outside the window in nature, in Shelburne, then you know the soil is healthy. If I'm in Montreal and I plug it near all the sources of electricity, where so many people and there are appliances, there are so many things, smart meters, then you might get this electricity that's running, actually the ground becomes electrified, and you don't really know what the effects will be. So in certain cases, some EMF mitigation experts, I know that Brian and a lot of people in the building biology movement don't really agree with that. They say, well, it's kind of a hit or miss. So my recommendation right now is you can try it, but the best practices is just spending time in nature. And you will also, I mean, I know Dr. Zagbush will be presenting the benefits, the other benefits you're gonna get in nature are way more important than this. So just be aware that some people will talk about earthing, grounding, using these things connected to the electricity. And right now, there's not a clear answer on it, but nature is probably the way to go. Number 2 strategy, get naked in the sun. And that's an important part. And I was not naked in this picture. It's actually, I was just, I swear, I don't have proof of this. But basically, why is it important? Well, electro-pollution under 6 gigahertz, so that's most of the pollution we have right now, is linked with instability of the VDR molecule. What the heck is that? It's the vitamin D receptor. And there's one researcher in particular, Professor Trevor Marshall from Autoimmunity Research Foundation in California, who looked at this and said, that's bizarre, because I know that a lot of people have a hard time raising their vitamin D levels these days, and I cannot figure out why. It might be because the VDR it doesn't work as well, so the vitamin D receptor, and it's just affecting our body in so many ways that maybe we'll find in 50 years from now, but it's just food for thought. Is it, and I know that this is something, if Jack Cruz is listening to that, is like, yeah, I told that last time. But yeah, it's true. It's something he told me about in an interview, saying, Nick, if you're in a high EMF environment, there are biological reasons why we cannot produce enough vitamin D. So in other words, if you're in a high EMF environment, you gotta take your sun exposure even more seriously than someone who would just be in the countryside. And there are a few reasons that the sun helps you combat EMFs. It is essential to regulate calcium inside your body. So it has effects on calcium signaling, calcium shuttling. So in other words, there are probably good reasons to think that it's trying to bring your body back in homeostasis when all these EMFs are causing calcium dysregulation on a cellular level, recharges your mitochondria, cellular energy, and we know that EMFs will reduce your cellular energy, regulates your circadian rhythm. We've had so many great talks this weekend about that, and melatonin production. In fact, there are several studies showing that the more you expose yourself to the sun during the day, the more melatonin production you'll have at night. So it's not just using blue blockers and avoiding lights at night, but also getting sun during the day. And getting sun sometimes, even just going outside, if it's cloudy for a few minutes, just your retina and your skin will pick up the signal that, oh, there's actually a day, and then it creates kind of a separation, then there's a night. So when it becomes dark, then your body starts producing more melatonin. Combating inflammation is also extremely important, which is one of the things caused by electrosmog. And 6 strategies to get more sun. It's really, this is the sunrise in Montreal. I think it was in the summer, I cannot recall, but we have a rooftop balcony, so I'm really grateful for this place because of that. Very early in the morning, and looking towards the sun in the morning is really great to set your circadian rhythm on the right path. Again, Jack Cruz or Jason Prohl did a presentation that talked about that. A lot of people are now discovering that this good old ancestral practice of rise with the sun and then look also at the sunset, there's something to it. And there's something very powerful for biology. That summer where I took this picture 2 summers ago, I literally woke up at the exact minute with sunrise every morning. So it was 5:14 a.m. On a Tuesday and on a Wednesday was 5:15 and 5:16, and I didn't do anything. It was basically my body now was attuned to how the season is evolving. So when you do things the right way, you start just waking up naturally at the exact time where the sun is rising, and you have time to run on the balcony and see that. It's beautiful. And around noon, depending on the latitude, you want to get outside and expose as much of your body as you can for at least 15-20 minutes, and once you get pink, cover yourself. A lot of people are afraid of getting skin cancer and sunburns. Sunburns aren't good, but you want to make yourself pink. And I remember we were in Southeast Asia with our son Elliot. He was about nine months old, and I was so keen on not putting a hat on the baby, even though he's being blasted with the sun. And Jen was like, I don't know if that's, I didn't even know if that's the right thing. Well, I'm like, okay, if he gets pink, you cover him up. And he never got that bad because it was in the winter and the UV wasn't that bad. But it's just a lot of parents would have covered that baby up, like cover him, he's gonna, as if he's gonna catch fire or something. I mean, he's like, no, they can, like back, like our ancestors would have laughed at that, how protective we are. And how fearful of the sun we are, really. So always put sunscreen after you've received your dose of uncovered sunshine. And that's not something that's being advocated. Even people, dermatologists and people who are into cancer prevention would say, no, put your sunscreen or else you'll burn. Well, we know that vitamin D has a great protective effect against cancer. So what is the deal? Well, we should probably do both. If you are to be exposed at the beach 8 hours at the equator because you decided to go in Mexico, you never expose yourself, and then you're gonna be naked for 7 days, you're gonna burn. But so you probably want to have some sort of protection on, and if that's the healthiest sunscreen you can find, fine, but at least expose yourself for a few minutes before putting on your sunscreen, because this is the way that you're going to produce vitamin D, and the sunscreen blocks UV, so you will likely not create enough vitamin D if you put sunscreen first. Take sun breaks instead of smoking breaks. This is also the idea from Jack Kruse, which I thought was really brilliant. Well, a lot of people get smoke breaks at work to give themselves more units of cancer. So why is it that you cannot go outside for 5 minutes every hour or 2 minutes every hour to just remove the glasses, remove the sunglasses, no contacts if you can help it, and just look around, do nothing? So that's just like meditation, right? Very, very, very boring, very useful for the human psyche. And you just expose yourself to natural light, and just that, doing that every hour, every couple hours, will do a tremendous benefit. And sometimes it's very, here in the room, for example, we think that, oh yeah, I can see pretty good. There's a lot of lighting here and a lot of light. There's not. If you compare to just the exterior where it's cloudy, there's thousands and thousands of times more units of light that would penetrate your retina. It's just an illusion because this is artificial light and it doesn't have the same power. So just going outside a little bit retunes your body that says, oh yeah, I remember now it's the day, instead of here that we're kind of in a very dim environment, even if you think that there's sufficient lighting. End the day by looking towards the sunset, and you can also wear kinnicky shorts, which lets you be technically naked without having neighbors call the police. And this is a type of boxer shorts, or there are different models, but this is also something I've learned from Jack. The kinnicky shorts it's called just a tan-true boxer shorts or swimsuit. So in other words, it lets UV touch the areas that do not get kissed by the sun very, very often. So it has great benefits too, right? All our body parts need to be exposed, but again, in our society, depending on where you live, it might be okay or not. So it is one trick that you can use to get more sun. And I want to share something, tell you why I'm drinking kombucha. Well, the effect of kombucha on some trace element levels in different organs of electromagnetic field exposed rats. What does that mean? Well, kombucha can be protective against EMF. And why is that? Well, basically, they gave rats kombucha. I don't know what flavor. They didn't. They might be the blueberry one. I don't know. But basically, they say we can state that kombucha as a supplement has an ameliorative signs against the effect of electromagnetic radiation. Why is that? Because it brought the rats' blood levels of minerals to a sufficient degree. And zinc and other minerals act as antioxidant, and for example, magnesium levels really help regulate calcium. So there are a lot of signs that show that if you have enough minerals in your body, you can also have fewer effects from this radiation. Which brings me to the point number 4, eat farm fresh foods. And this is literally a feast that we had going to Chantal Market in Montreal. Oysters, sausage, everything that you could find here. I mean, Shelburne Farms, you're really at the right place to eat the best farm fresh foods. But the more you eat clean, actually, the more you'll be able to be resilient to EMF. So that's good news if you already do this part right. The food groups identified to combat EMFs is the foods that are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant rich, the foods which stimulate a pathway called NRF2. And NRF2 is your internal antioxidant protection. Sometimes you can have antioxidant in your food, so the blueberries enter in, they give you protection. But also you have the strongest defense that you have is glutathione or superoxide dismutase or catalase. So you have antioxidants in your body that are created by your body to mount a defense against oxidants from the environment. But this production actually is shown if you live near cell phone towers or in a high EMF environment. Slowly but surely, your natural production of antioxidant gets lowered and lowered as your health declines, and has this amount of antioxidant isn't sufficient to combat against everything that's trying to oxide you so fast. Also, mineral rich and local, chemical free, fresh in season. So everything you would eat at the restaurant, highly recommend it here. And Mom was right. Do eat your veggies. But when it comes to EMF, super important. So foods which improve mitochondrial function will also improve your resiliency to EMF. So cruciferous veggies, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, olive oil in particular. Is it me? That this source is what made her sick instantly. It's not like that. It's more like cumulative exposure. For some people, they can pinpoint that when I changed my phone, then I started being extremely sensitive, as if now the bucket is filled and they cannot take it anymore. But it can be a high level. talking on your phone is connected to the antenna, and your phone has the EMFs, and you're creating distance. However, you have earbuds that is a metal wire, and the radio frequency radiation could go up the wire and kind of concentrate in the wire. Imagine if you had one of these old TVs, you can put aluminum foil on the little like rabbit ears, right? It's kind of the same idea. So it is conductive, and for this reason, I've seen good indications that it could be granted to use like an air tube headset. That you just have a part that's metal, but up until this point, there's no metal. It's just a hollow tube, basically, and then just as if you were talking in a tin can to someone else. So it's basically just sound, but the sound is really good. In fact, if you get a good set. Yeah. Sure. Are we good? I just had like 2 slides left. It's bad karma.
You have a great voice too, so it really carries.
Oh, thank you. Do we try it? Are we live? 1, 2. No? Yes? Yes? Okay. Just finishing on that very rapidly, and you can look at the slides later. The idea is just eat natural food, honestly. Like we can study and find new antioxidants, find new compounds, and then get geeky over it. Oh, cinnamon is this and this, and no, not this kind of cinnamon. Yeah, there's some use to it, but mainly it's for people who want to study it and understand it on like a head level. In the end, if you eat real food, if it's very fresh from nature, you get probably way more benefits than trying to pick up these foods and import them, and they're 3 months old, and it just doesn't make sense to me. So really local and fresh, garden fresh is the ideal way to go. A few foods that stimulate NRF2 that I talked about, so that help raise your natural antioxidant defense is, again, the cruciferous veggies, everything that is in the bright red, orange, and yellow color. So Eat the Rainbow does stand. Every time you're hitting a new color of veggie or of different foods, you're getting new benefits. You should really vary your diet and really, according to the seasons, the foods that are high in zinc, especially seafood and organ meats, also high sources of DHA. So that's going to be tremendous also for NRF2 stimulation. Turmeric, garlic, and then you have also a lot of foods that are high in vitamin E, especially what's called gamma tocopherols. So black walnuts, sesame seed, pecans, English walnuts. So there's a lot of things, but in the end, it all comes down to eating real food. So again, an ancestral practice that most people have steered very far from, and that just makes it even worse for them to be exposed to something foreign and something that is oxidative damage for their biology. And just to conclude, I have other things that are educational resources. The non-tinfoil guide to EMS, unfortunately I didn't have time to ship some in the back, but it's on Amazon everywhere. You get there's an ebook version, there's a Kindle version, and there's the hard copy. .com, .ca, .co.uk, Japan, Australia, everything. So you can find that, and the Korean version for Korean people in the room. No. Anyway, there's also the Korean version, and I just wanted to tell you about it. I'm proud. So the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMS is the book. I wrote it in mid 2017. Still very valid. I'm gonna update it very soon. And then the next level for people who are professionals, want to go deeper, want to learn all about the different sources, the symptoms. It's really a professional level course that I've built with Dr. Klinghardt and other collaborators. It's called Electrosmog RX, and we've just relaunched it. We had hundreds of practitioners take it, and the feedback has been great. So these are really the 2 resources to find more about my work. There's also the website, theemfguy.com, that I really should have a slide about that. But this is where you'll find my YouTube channel, Facebook, etc., to find my free information that I publish, including a newsletter that I send from time to time. And that's the official ending of the presentation. So now you can clap. Thank you. Okay. How much time? 20? Okay. We have time. Good news. I'm going to try to take as many questions as possible. Okay, let me choose. This man was first, I think. Yes.
Yes, so what are your best practices around travel, whether it's navigating the full body scanners to fabrics to grounding off the metal planks or what's available?
Yeah, okay, this is a charged question. I'll try to be brief. For the airport scanners, and this is a slide I had last year, but the airport scanner uses a power, let's say, of 30 to 60 microwatts per square meter in a type of radiation that's going to be used by 5G, so the millimeter wave range. A 5G cell phone would use 100,000, 250,000 of the same units. So the airport scanner, in my mind at the moment, with the levels that I've seen that they emit, is almost a non-issue. I think, out of paranoia a little bit, in case I'm wrong, I could still opt out, but it's not a big issue compared to even people who play on their cell phone after the scanner. So this is what's crazy, really. The fear, people fear the scanner, oh my God, millimeter waves. Well, the 5G antennas are going to use the same frequencies, probably harsher signals, and the levels will be thousands and thousands of times higher. So doesn't mean the scanner was dangerous in the first place. I think it's more like in the collective mind, a lot of people were very afraid of it, but they should be more afraid of their own cell phone. For travel, there are a few things you can do. Well, in the hotel rooms, I found that just having a basic EMF meter can really help. There's a few that I talk about on my websites and whatnot that are just detectors. I could detect, for example, in Austin, Texas, that under my bed, there was a high-power Wi-Fi router that was put, and it was like a 5-star hotel that I was invited at to go record a podcast in Austin. So I had to dismantle the bed, and it weighed literally a ton, and I have a video about that. And then the router was there, and I could measure it. I'm like, oh no, these guys, like, they really offer me the best pillows and everything to make me like sleep perfectly, but then they put a Wi-Fi router. I don't know if it was a bad joke, dark humor, like I don't know what people but I did not find it that funny. So I unplugged the thing, and then the next day I replugged it. So probably the next person that came slept very badly that night. But other practices, hydrating yourself constantly on an airplane, making sure, depending on the time, trying to have blue blockers on if it's an overnight flight, kind of trying to mimic the time of the day where you're going to go to try to fight jet lag, and then grounding yourself in nature as soon as you can, or on just usually it's grass that you can find on a patch of grass in a city after you land. These practices are pretty much the top, and then a lot of people recommend maybe like CoQ10 is one supplement that I would take a lot of, and I personally take also what is it, just activated charcoal, just for the bad air and everything you're gonna get exposed to in planes. And that's pretty much like my basic routine at the moment. Yes, in the back?
Thank you for that presentation. I also mentioned shielding and two others that help with this.
Yes.
There's another organization, if it's okay if you mention, it's called Biogeometry, biogeometry.ca. I'm Canadian, that's how I log on. They actually sell, I had travel with a little thing in the car, and I can feel the difference, but people are trained to, once you take the course, that you can check it with, like, in the hotel room, so you do that. And the reason we got involved is because, so with things like diabetes, kids, a lot of kids or adults are wearing the pump, then they wear a continuous glucose monitor,
Yeah.
Bluetooth, you're having Bluetooth go through their body. This is my son, he has Bluetooth going through his body all the time.
Yeah.
Biogeometry.ca, Biogeometry has ways to help nullify that on the body. So we can't shut our Wi-Fi off in our house because it's what helps keep them alive. So it says, and so the parents, if you know any parents who have kids on pumps or these they're advertised on TV, like the Libre.ca, these are ways to help protect
Yeah.
Is that true? Because I tried and I toss on my phone to face that, well, to the other person, but maybe in nature. Just wondering
Yeah.
if there's any.
Okay, so first the popcorn question. I don't think that video was accurate. I don't think it would be possible to produce enough heating. But that, and the truth is the safety guidelines that we follow at the moment are based on eating. Trey told me to repeat the question. The question was about a few cell phones in a circle on a YouTube video, and every cell phone gets called at the same time, and then like a popcorn just pops. You're like, oh, that's my head, and you get. I don't think it was a real video. However, it makes people think, so maybe that's a good thing. But the antenna can be in the last third of the cell phone, but depending on the model, I've seen model where it's lower, so it's really hard to tell. It varies, and you would just need to look at like antenna placement, iPhone, whatever that you have, and maybe you'll find where the antenna is. Usually they have like the blueprints or where the components are, but still creating distance overall is really the intelligent thing to do. When it comes to you had a question or a comment about biogeometry. I think it's important to talk about this and other chips and pendants and different modalities that can that are said to neutralize or harmonize the EMFs. I found, especially biogeometry, I found very impressive case studies where I know it's Dr. Ibrahim Karim from biogeometry, and he's actually lives in Montreal, and he's a high-end researcher who did different things to. The way I see it is it's very hard to tell at the moment if subtle energy work or certain of these devices nullify or really protect 100% of the user. And people who, companies who claim this, I think it's a bit of a slippery slope, because you don't really know if it's nullifying 100% of the effects. We don't have these studies that prove it. What I can tell you is that a lot of people feel different when they use biogeometry. I've heard good things. I've heard good things about other products. And whether it's a placebo effect or the effects are real, I don't really care, but people are getting less symptoms. So for example, I can use my cell phone, I don't get a headache, or I don't get heart palpitations. However, my problem, and the advice that Dr. Klinghardt told me is, well, these devices need to be used with a context in mind. First, you have to know that you still need to reduce your exposure. If people think this is a panacea, they install this on a cell phone and now I'm protected, and next thing I see them, they talk 6 hours on the day near their head. I hope it's protective, but if they're wrong, maybe they're gonna develop a brain tumor, and I would hate myself for it. So right now, what I'm saying is, first you gotta remove EMS. All these steps are still valid. Then certain of these devices, to me, I've seen good test results. I've seen some science done on them where clearly people feel better, but maybe it's playing on the symptoms, and I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to tell you advice that I'm going to regret in 5 years from now. So you can still use them. If you find something that works for you, fine, but it needs to be used in conjunction with seeing a professional, reducing your own exposure as much as you can, and other things that we talked about. And you had also another question. Can you repeat it?
Curious, in the greenhouses where they're
Yes.
growing, organically, but there's Wi-Fi and all the computer applications, have there been any studies on these grown in those systems?
Yeah, studies on how fast plant can grow or how slower plant grow in Wi-Fi environments. I'm aware of a few tests that have been going around Facebook where they've grown this class of, I think, like it might be preschool or something like that, something very very early folks that grown. I think it was watercress sprouts or something like that near a Wi-Fi router, and they had other watercress sprouts not near a Wi-Fi router, and they saw a difference. And I think that the studies are pretty clear that the same or similar calcium channels that I've shown you in human cells are present in plants and in animals, in insects, and all of nature. So it's pretty clear that there's probably an effect that could be detrimental if it's exposure all the time to plants. I haven't seen good data, but there are a lot of environmentalist organizations now that are talking, that are saying that 5G is one of the upcoming problems for the environment, especially because it becomes more and more global. And if it's from space, as we've seen, then, well, of course, humans are still affected, but nature that was in corners in the few radio silent zone that remains are now gone. So the effects on nature will be seen later, but there is good indication that nature is being tremendously affected on a plant level, but also the bees and insects and all animals as well. Yes.
Electric cars and the GPS monitors in the car, and when you get up when sunrise, do you look directly at the sun or like 20 degrees off the horizon?
So the first question, do you look directly at the sun? I would not do it. I know some practices sun staring and things like that. I have never done it. I've heard good things. I don't know, I would feel comfortable with that, except maybe if you have someone that you trust that can coach you through the process, especially the very early rays, not when the sun is up, of course. You don't want to burn your eyes, but you look towards the general direction of the sun. Sometimes it's too much. You would literally look on the floor, but it's like you get a lot of light and you try to open your eyes, or if you squint and if you cry, usually it's a sign that you need more, you need to get more of the sun in your eyes. And a lot of people that I know who wear sunglasses all the time, they go outside and without the sunglasses they cannot see anything. They're completely blind. So eventually, if you remove the sunglasses, your eyes actually become accustomed. What was your second question? Sorry. Electric cars. Yeah. So the question was, what about electric cars or hybrid? It's, of course, there are, it's really unclear if an electric car is really worse than certain types of non-electric car, because for example, in non-electric cars, just a Chevrolet that I rent at the Avis near my home, it had a 3G, 4G, LTE Wi-Fi hotspot in there. So in other words, there was a Wi-Fi router right in my face as I was driving, just so people in the back seat that, well, I was alone in the car, so there was no one, but the signal is always on, so it's giving signal to someone in the car for free, and it's getting picked up by an antenna probably somewhere in the dash or on top of the car. So it's not something, you're exposed to tremendous levels in modern cars that have modern equipment. Certain GPS now have an emitter also, usually a GPS chip in your phone is just a receiver, but in the car I've heard that it can be also an emitter. There's multiple problems with modern cars, and probably if you go with a little bit older models, you're on a safe side. And as far as hybrid and electric goes, we don't have a lot of data about that. I've heard horrible things on an EMF standpoint from people who take their meters and look at them. Other cars are a little bit safer, but there's not a good resource that I could share, unfortunately. I just know that for some people who are now extremely sensitive to all forms of EMFs, for them because they can feel it buzzing. Some people are more reactive to certain frequencies than others. So I wish I had an easy answer, but probably a good old car like the good old muscle car probably have some benefits after all. Yes, in the back.
Some people claim that metal eyeglasses or eye frames can act as an antenna and then increase EMF cranially or central nervous system. Is that true or is it not true? Is there any evidence to support that?
There's one study that I know that looked at people who talk on a cell phone, and if you have the signal so close to the metal frame. In fact, these are kind of metal frame, just this part, but if you have all metal, you in fact increase what they call the SAR, so which is a reading of like kind of thermal radiation across the eye area. So yeah, you have a concentration of EMFs in that case. Is there proof that it can pick up ambient EMFs? I wouldn't say, but it's not unlikely that it can do so. So metal on the body, it becomes complicated. I've heard from practitioners, people who have metal hip replacement, different body parts that have metal or screws in it that are reactive If I'm near Wi-Fi, I get a little bit of a tingling sensation. So it's these interactions are really unknown, but including metal in the body, heavy metal load, for example, we know in medical science right now that people who have a lot of heavy metals in their body are generally more sensitive for a lot of reasons, and maybe there's even a physical aspect to it where there's interaction with different heavy metals in your cells and the ambient EMFs, but we don't know much more about that. Yes?
Could you recommend a brand of the air tube earbuds or headsets that you?
Sure. A brand of air tube headset. One of them is Defender Shield. That's a good. They have good products. And the owner, Daniel Dubon, is an electrical engineer of 45 years experience. He used to work with Bell Labs, so makes me very confident he's creating things that work. And he's someone, you see, there are people from the industry. Daniel Dubon is one. He's an engineer who created the technology, developed the early internet and communications, and now he's realizing, oh my God, no, these things, I don't want these things for my kids. And the technology has been developed in a way that's not supportive of human health. And there's a lot of people from the industry, in fact, that are, they're just not bad guys. It's just some people are caught in a job where this is what we do. We just roll out the technology, and they're trying to change. That's also an important thing to remember. I think I have 4 minutes. Let's take a few more questions. Yes?
What are your thoughts on the outlet baby monitors?
On the what baby monitors?
The outlet, I don't know if you're familiar with those or not. They're used to measure, to lower the risk of SIDS in babies.
I'm not familiar with, how do you spell it out?
Outlet, O-W-L-E-T.
So the Owlet baby monitor, I'm not familiar with it, but if it's like any baby monitor, if it uses a wireless technology, probably I would just move it as far away as you can. But if it's for early infants, is it something that you're supposed to put very close to the baby? Around their foot. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really not a big fan. You know, there are French independent tests that have come out for just cell phones for adults that have found that 9 out of 10 cell phones that they tested goes over the limit of radiation that is allowed, and this limit is so old. It dates back from the 90s. So this is for adults. There are huge concerns in adults for cancer risk. So if you have any device that's wireless and touches the body of an infant, the risks are probably way more important. So all these technologies that are, and that's the thing, don't get me wrong though, if it's a premature birth, at problem children, is there a benefit to keeping this child alive? Well, yes. So sometimes it can be a priority using EMFs, and in this case, you would have more benefits than harm. So maybe a short-term thing could, in fact, have still benefits. We still use X-rays in a medical setting, but just enough in when we feel like it's needed. It is very controlled. The difference is that these non-ionizing radiation from Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, we use them just abusively right now. So in certain medical settings, some people tell me, well, I have this glucose monitor. If I don't have it, I'm going to drop dead. Well, keep it. Like, keep it at all costs. Do other things, right? But at the same time, maybe we're going to develop eventually the same technology that can be connected with half the power or with a millionth of the power. And that's the goal, getting there, recognizing the problem, and dropping the power levels until we can achieve something that we feel is fairly healthy, or where the benefits outweigh the risks. But right now, the ratio is completely broken. So as of now, I would never use a wearable technology for kids, except if you have a very specific medical situation in which the technology could literally save the kid's life, and you could use it short term. So this is what I would tell you about that. Yeah. Yes?
So the glasses, the yellow glasses that the Lacker Foundation gave us, can you just address that a little bit? And also about the risk from watching a television that's somewhere across the room as opposed to watching an iPad that's sitting with you on your bed. What is the difference in that and health-wise?
Okay, well, the glasses block blue light. It's another of new EMFs, right? Because we used to have candlelight, fire, basically nothing else. After that, we got the Edison bulb that had a very orangish look to it. It didn't have a lot of blue light, but nowadays all the sources of light have a lot of blue, so it's very artificial to the human body. So when you wear your blue blockers at night, you're kind of protecting your eyes, which is the main gateway to having this information. Your skin also to some extent, and you're supporting basically your body being tricked into thinking there's no blue light around. So it's a bit of a protection against blue light at night that a lot of people report better sleep, for example. And your second question was?
Watching a television that's across the room, what that emits to us as opposed to watching an iPad that's on our bed.
Yeah, so what the difference between an iPad on the bed or television? Well, the television itself could be connected via Wi-Fi, especially the new TVs. So that's one thing. A lot of them are kind of smart TVs. Smart is really a buzzword for wireless. In the end, some of them you can turn off the Wi-Fi connectivity. Some of them you can't. And more manufacturers are removing the option to turn off the Wi-Fi signal because no one uses it, and it's not a thing that people demand. So generally, if you're watching a tablet really close to your body and it's streaming data, it's connected on Netflix or something like that, and it's not pre-downloaded content, and then you're on airplane mode, I would say that the TV is probably safer because you're likely to be at a much greater distance from it, and put your blue blockers if it's before bed, if possible. But the tablet, a lot of people would watch it closer, or some people watch even videos on their cell phone and they're like that. Well, now you've got not only the fact that you're streaming video, so you're really at maximum radiation power from your tablet or your phone, and then also there's proximity. So just try to think what can I put away from my body as much as possible, and this is really the right answer.
So downloading is safer than streaming.
If you pre-download, you put something on your tablet, and then you can be offline, then it would be very much safer, especially for children. That's another example. We hand tablets to children, and most parents don't think twice about it, but they could pre-download content or games that could be played offline, and then children would not be exposed to this radiation needlessly. Sure. And I think, do we have Trey, are you there? No. Left alone again? That's all right. Well, we'll go on. I'll take a couple more. Yes. Yes, the question is, if you don't feel it, are you still getting the effects on your calcium channels? And so far, we haven't asked the rats in studies about calcium channels if they're feeling it or not. It's just the cellular mechanisms, and all of them are getting affected. And why they know that this is happening is that they gave calcium channel blocking drugs to the rats, and they saw almost 100% of the effects disappearing. Now, it doesn't mean that calcium channel drugs are good for you against EMS, because they lead to a bunch of other consequences. Why? Because the calcium channels need to be open. It's a gateway where the calcium needs to go out, go in. It's a signaling pathway also. So if you took these calcium channel blocking drugs, like some people take for hypertension or different reasons, day in and day out, you would still get side effects, and sometimes it would maybe even be more detrimental compared to the EMFs. So we know that this is still happening whether there's symptoms or not, and it's very unclear what is the correlation between the cellular damage and the symptoms. There are good reasons to think that these are two separate things that sometimes can be correlated but sometimes not. Certain people have grown extremely sensitive and have literally a hyperreaction to a small signal that is ridiculous to other people. Literally, I've heard about reports of people getting seizures if someone opens a cell phone at 10 feet. Like literally getting triggered like that, and the only way they realize that is that they now cannot live in society. Trust me. So it is, you can be hypersensitive, but the good news is that people who treat these cases, for example, Dr. Dominique Belpomme from France, who's a main researcher on the topic, has seen thousands of patients, He usually says that it can be reversed. This hypersensitivity, and you could go back to a normal degree of functioning of, let's say, just being in this room, right? Some people couldn't be in this room, but it can be reversed if you work on a multi-modality plan, including detoxification and various things.
And is there a way to test this out to see how much excess calcium?
I don't know if there's a good test when it comes to excess calcium, but there are some markers that might be correlated, like DNA damage in urine, 8-OHG, I think, might be wrong on this one, and also MTT in urine, that is nitrotyrosine, I think, or it sounds like nitro in a car. I'm not too sure. NTT, I'll find you the study. It's a 2015 study, and there are some biomarkers that are starting to be identified that in people who have this hypersensitivity, they have a similar profile when it comes to certain markers of damage, low vitamin D, high blood histamine, and different things. So it's just starting to be recognized, but in the mind of these researchers who are not studying, is this a mental illness, they're studying, is this physical illness. For them, it's very clear. They say, no, without the shadow of a doubt, this is a physical thing. So for some people, it could be in their mind, like, okay, you have paranoia over cell towers, but in this case, you could test the blood and see nothing, and the person is still sick. Well, you could refer them to someone who can help them with their mind, but this is not the case for most people, and it's just starting to develop these tests and this understanding. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that one of the symptoms of EMF exposure could be visual disturbances.
Yeah.
Do you have some examples of how it could affect their eyes?
She said, do you have some examples of how EMS could affect the eyes because of it's one of the symptoms, visual disturbances? I'm not sure. I know that some people who have EHS, it's blurry vision, that gets very worse, and then it gets better when they're not exposed. And also I heard one man that I know who's an activist literally gets little veins in his eyes that explode. Like he gets almost bloodshot eyes from getting exposed to EMFs. He's hypersensitive. He got better. It was at his worst point, but literally, if he stood near a Wi-Fi, you would see his head becoming bright red almost. Yeah. Yes.
Do we have any rights around these 5G antennas going up in our communities?
Yes. So the question, do we have any rights of saying no to the 5G towers? In the US, it's way more complicated because there's a federal level and then the state level and then each, well, sometimes it's the region and then the city level. And who is responsible for the right of way and installing things near people? So there are multiple layers of complexity here. Certain cities, like there's one north of San Francisco that kind of voted something that says we don't want to install those because we still have control over where things can be installed. But the wireless industry is playing on the federal level to say we should remove the right to all states and all cities and just keep it federal to install these antennas wherever we please, because it's a matter of rolling technology as fast as possible. Why? Because they're in a race to be the first to roll 5G before the Chinese can come in or competitors can come in. So you still have rights on an individual level. There's an organization, 5gcrisis.com. That's a good one to follow, and they talked about what could be done. And another one is Trust, the Environmental Health Trust. That's a scientific think tank, and they have tremendous articles about what can be done on a state level. And there are, in the U.S., there are so many organizations that are in each state or certain cities already trying to stop this. And there are also 3 senators right now, or three congressmen that are aware of these dangers and really fighting now for better regulation. There's Rep. DeFazio, Blumenthal, and Colbeck. So these Colbeck, I think he's in New York City.
So these three are really on our side, and it's good to see that some politicians are starting to understand that people care about this, and it's just starting in the U.S. But you can get involved. Trust is, I think, one of the best organizations on the topic. 5G crisis. There's American for Safe Technologies. There's Physicians for Safe Technologies. You know, there's a lot of organizations, and if you just email them, they are always looking for new people who can say, okay, how can we organize ourselves, make our community aware? And when there's a number of people protesting against this, well, politicians, regulators, they become very stressed, very anxious about it. Like, what are we? Because it's the wireless industry has really organized the law since '96, since Clinton passed the 1996 Telecom Act, to make it so that the telecom won't be held liable if anything happens over a health effect. In fact, you cannot argue over cell tower placement anywhere on a federal level based on health effects. Like, I don't want this tower because I think it's going to harm me. But what you can say is, I don't want this tower because it's not pretty. Then you can fight over it. That's how they set it up. And it's still, some people say, no, that's unconstitutional. There's a lot of debate, but on some city level, they did that, and they blocked 5G. But again, if on a federal level it passes, maybe it's going to just nullify everything. So it's a huge fight, but at the same time, people are starting to wake up. And even in California, there's a lot, well, it's always California, right? That starts these movements. So there's a lot of people fighting there and in multiple states. So I think there's hope. It's just that we're not only way behind, and I see we in Canada is the same thing. People, I think it's even, the awareness is even like so late in Canada. We don't understand any of these things. So at the moment, unfortunately. So in Belgium, for example, the mayor of not the mayor, but the environmental minister of the Brussels region said, our people will not be guinea pigs for the 5G technology. And then she's a politician. And I was like, oh wow, that's very awesome that we still have politicians that kind of fight for truth and for people's health. And they blocked 5G for now. They said, no, we will not. In Brussels, you know, you would have to raise the limits of allowed radiation because they're so low compared to ours in order to install 5G. So it's going to be difficult for the industry to roll this out in various European countries. But here, our safety guidelines are so permissive that they could do whatever they want and saturate the environment, and we would still be so below the guidelines that it would say it's super safe. So it really depends on who you talk to and in what country, because in other countries with the levels that 5G is going to expose the population to, they close down parks and ban access to the public. And this is what's happening right now in Italy, for example, at comparable levels to what we're installing in this country. So it can be stopped. And this is important that even if it's installed, it can be uninstalled. Like if we feel powerless, we are powerless in some sense. But it can be fought, and no matter what laws are passed, it can be done. With tobacco, we saw it with different industries. So it's a very dire situation, but at the same time, we still can do something about it. But it really starts with awareness, because a lot of people don't even know, oh, what's EMF, you know? Starting with the basics and going from there. Yeah. Yes?
I just wanted to ask you about technologies or whether or not you feel they're effective. The products put out by Synergy Science, do you think that they are effective, and also Shanghai?
And also Shanghai. Yeah, so products by Synergy Science, is that it? And Shanghai? I'm not aware of the first company. Shanghai is one of the minerals that is said to kind of help with EMF-related symptoms. I've seen some research about that. Actually, that's credible. It comes from Russia, and even in Russia, there are some engineers looking at how to incorporate this in our technology. So Shanghai, by all means, try it. Some people feel real effects. But again, is it playing on the symptoms or real protection? I'm not too sure. Probably it cannot hurt if you still minimize your visual exposure. Are we good? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Anything I recommend in a work environment. The first thing is send my book to your boss, but mainly it's Ethernet cables everywhere. So usually this is not something such high cost because most work environments already have wires running in the walls, and it's kind of easier to do the changes, especially if the workstations are just in one place. I mean, even if people are on laptops, you don't need to be on Ethernet. And this is something I went around of in Austin when I was invited of Onit, and that's a gym, but they have an entire office of people working. Everyone is on Wi-Fi, but it's like a garage environment. You could just run the wires could just run in the ceiling. It's all open, so it will be a very easy fix. A couple $100. They would wire the entire, maybe a few thousand with technicians and all, but very easy fix. And then people, if they want to move their computer around, open the Wi-Fi. That's all right. Maybe they could still have Wi-Fi, but the worst is not the Wi-Fi router that's somewhere. It would be your own computer in front of you. So if you can cut down on that, it would still lead to great benefits. Yeah.